you start? And which players should you sit for this critical 13 of the fantasy football season? What's going on, football fans and fantasy freaks? It's Mitch here with the return of Stardom and Situm on OwnersBox Fantasy. 4 starts, 4 sits to help you identify the players to win you your week, and which players you maybe want to stay away from. If that sounds good, spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more fantasy football, Stardom and Situm every week, because I'm going to be running this video each and every week through the fantasy playoffs. Get in the comments if you have any start questions at all. I'll be there to help you out. Let's go. Let's begin with the quarterback position. Our first start of the week is Justin Herbert versus the Atlanta Falcons. First of all, Justin Herbert is playing like an absolute baller right now. Yeah, it wasn't an incredible outing for the Chargers against the Ravens, which makes it even that more obvious to start Justin Herbert in a bounce back spot against an Atlanta Falcons defense that can't rush the passer. They won't even lay a finger on big Justin Herbert. The way that he can maneuver the pocket, the laser beams that he's putting forth on the football field right now, you have to start this guy against one of the worst pass rushes in football. If he has time, I don't care who's at receiver for him. Maybe Quentin Johnston can learn how to catch the ball with an extra week of preparation, but as long as the guys are catching the ball, you know that Herbert with time is going to hit them in stride. So Herbert is a must start against a very weak Atlanta pass rush. Their secondary, they've got guys, but I don't care how good your secondary is if you can never touch the quarterback or get any pressure at all. Herbert's going to go up and down the field throwing the ball. Plus, J.K. Dobbins is injured, which means more pass attempts for Justin Herbert. Our second start of the week at the quarterback position is C.J. Stroud versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville has been the worst defense in the NFL, especially when it comes to the pass this season. Stroud has been up and down and all around, and he's been struggling for sure. The pass protection has not held up for him, but his biggest and best fantasy game of the season was against Jacksonville earlier this year in Houston. Now he plays them in Jacksonville. Nico is healthy. Tank Dell is still there. And yes, they want to run the ball, but the Texans know the weakness of Jacksonville, everybody knows, is their pass defense. And I could see after a loss to the Titans, a motivated CJ Stroud, a motivated Texans offense to go out there and put up some fireworks. So with Trevor Lawrence being back as well on the other side, that could actually push Stroud to throwing the ball more. And this could potentially be a close game. So without Mac Jones, it just doesn't allow the Texans to just sit there and run the ball all game. They're actually going to have to push to score points in this one. So I think the Texans, their offense, they need a back on track game, and I think they get it right before the bye week in this matchup. Our third start of the week at quarterback is Matthew Stafford versus the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have been one of the 5 worst defenses in fantasy against quarterbacks, and Matthew Stafford has been lighting up the skies since he's got his Puka Nacua and his Cooper Kupp back. Yes, he actually leads the NFL in yards per game with those 2 players on the field. So if you were just to put every single quarterback in yards per game, the sample size of Matthew Stafford, about 6 games with Nacua and Kupp, he has 288 yards per game. He also has 13 of his 15 touchdowns. So basically anytime these 2 receivers are on the field, Stafford is a decent start. But especially against a defense that got ripped up by Jameis Winston. I know the points weren't there, but the yards were there. And the Saints just simply have not been a very good pass rush. The weakness of the Rams is their offensive line and allowing pressure on Stafford. But against a team that doesn't rush the quarterback very well, it's going to leave those receivers extra time to find openings, and Stafford is going to hit them with a dime. So start Matthew Stafford this week in the Dome. Baker Mayfield is going to be our 4th and final start against the Carolina Panthers. Probably could have called this one. Panthers are not a very good defense. They have one of the worst pass rushes in football. They have to blitz to get home on your quarterback. And actually, they brought down Mahomes 5 times, but Tampa has a better O-line than the Chiefs. Tampa also has Mike Evans back, and Mike Evans has dominated the Carolina Panthers throughout his entire career. This is still a receiver that's chasing the 1,000-yard mark to extend his historic reign of 1,000-yard seasons. So I could see Mike Evans going nuclear, which means Baker Mayfield also is going nuclear in Carolina. This is one of the best offenses in football, and Baker is playing absolutely lights out. He can throw the football in the screen game. He's finding Cade Otton. He's finding guys like Sterling Shepard. And of course, Evans, I think, will have a huge game. So definitely, I'm backing the Bake Man for a big week in week 13 to get you that dub. Our quarterback sits. Let's begin with Bo Nix versus the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football. Bo Nix has been beautiful lately for fantasy, but I don't love this matchup, specifically because Bo has not played very many good defenses as of late. He just hasn't. The simple fact is he has not played a lot of decent secondaries, decent pass rushes, decent defenses in general. You look at who he's been beating up on as of late, and it's just bad defense after bad defense. Actually, in fact, every good defense he has played, he has not been startable in fantasy, and they have lost the game. You know, he played Kansas City a couple weeks ago, and they only put up 14 points. And that was actually one of Bo Nix's more impressive games. People are going to tell you to start Bo Nix, but I don't love it here. Unless Sean Payton finds some magic for Bo Nix in the screen game, I don't necessarily see him completing bombs down the field against Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson and this stout, sticky Cleveland secondary. I think Cleveland is going to bring a big test for rookie Bo Nix on Monday Night Football. I see this being a defensive game. And again, could Sean Payton surprise us with some magic? We've seen it before. I just don't think he has the ceiling that he's had in past weeks against teams like the Raiders, right? Against teams like the Falcons. Not good defenses. Cleveland has a top 10 defense. So I would sit Bo Nix. Jaden Daniels is going to be a surprise sit for me this week. I understand if you want to start him, that's totally cool, but I'm just throwing this out there. Tennessee is an excellent defense. I think they have a top 5 defense in the league, and they really have all year. In fact, they rank 2nd in total yards allowed this season, and the Titans have a good pass rush. I think they'll be able to totally lock down the Commander run game. More on that in a second. And I think there's been a little bit of a Cliff Kingsbury cliff for the Washington Commanders. Teams have figured out this offense, and they're all over their money concepts, their quick screens, and all the things that was allowing Jaden Daniels to look superhuman in the first part of the season. Also, if you look a little bit deeper at when Daniels was playing well, he was playing against terrible defenses. Teams like the Bengals, when they were peak bad on defense, they had no defensive line, right? You look at that schedule early in the season, he was torching the worst of the worst. He's come back down to earth against good defenses like the Steelers, like the Eagles. He now faces another really tough defense in the Titans. I wouldn't be shocked if Washington went down again this week, and I think that is probably because Daniels does not have an awesome game. Now, his rushing floor gives you a floor to your position. So if you don't have a great alternative, like one of my starts this week, let's say a Baker Mayfield or a CJ Stroud or somebody like that, then perhaps just start Jaden Daniels. But I'm throwing that out there that I don't think he's going to have a great week. Our third sit of the week is going to be Anthony Richardson against my New England Patriots. Now, I wouldn't usually advise this season to sit a quarterback against the Patriots defense because the Patriots defense is absolutely horrible, but I do feel like this is a bad matchup for Richardson, and he's coming off a horrible game. And the reason I say that is, first of all, it's in New England, outdoors. Richardson is a dome quarterback playing for the Colts, and yeah, he played in Florida in college. So I'm not exactly sure how competent he will be in cold weather and or windy weather, which could definitely take place on a Sunday in Foxborough. I've seen it many times before. On top of that, the Patriots play a lot of man coverage, which is what exactly Richardson struggled with the Lions. On top of that as well, the Colts have injuries on their offensive line and at wide receiver. Josh Downs is probably out, his best receiver and best separator against man coverage. So I just don't see this being a good game for Richardson unless he gets a really big game from just running the ball. But as a passer, I see a very limited upside. I would go with an alternative option this week. Jameis Winston, as much as it pains me to say this, is also a sit in fantasy this week. My favorite player in football right now, the biggest meme there is, the funniest man in the NFL, versus the Denver Broncos. This is a really good Denver defense. It's a good secondary, and I could certainly see this being a bad Jameis game on the road in prime time for the world to see. I'm hoping that's not the case. I want more memes. I want more great clips. I want more great interviews. But it could be bad. Sean Payton knows Jameis very well, and he could give some insight to Vance Joseph and the Denver defense on what frustrates Jameis, what he's not good at, and that could also just be increased by the amount of pressure that Denver is able to put on the quarterback and how sticky their coverage is. Cleveland got away with a couple of close calls last week, and Jameis probably will have that flip the other way this week. He's been a bit on and off as of late, and Denver is a good defense, especially at home on prime time. They're there to make a statement. Our running back starts. Let's begin with my favorite, Bucky Irving versus the Carolina Panthers. I'm with you to the end of the line, Buck. Bucky Irving has been going off, bro. And he's going to go off again. Because the Carolina Panthers, really just throw on the tape. I know that it hurts your eyeballs to watch the Carolina Panthers defense, so maybe don't throw on the tape. But I'm telling you this. Every time last week, the Chiefs lined up in a short yardage distance for their running game, it was automatic 5 yards. It wasn't just like 1 yard or 2 yards or whatever they needed to convert. It was literally like 5, 6, 7 yard gains. That's how bad the Panthers run defense is. It's absolutely atrocious. They have absolutely nothing up front. And I think the Bucs will be able to do whatever they want offensively. Like I stated already, I think Baker's having a big game. I think Mike Evans having a big game. I think the Bucs are going for 30. This is one of the best offenses in football. Bucky just went for a 30 burger against the Giants. And the Panthers are equally as bad in terms of their run defense. So I think Bucky Irving almost doesn't deserve to be put in this category because I think he's just become a weekly start. He's almost, to this point, the only reason he's not an every week start is because of the competition in his backfield. That is really it. But he is going to go crazy this week in Carolina. Tony Pollard versus the Washington Commanders. This is a sneaky good start, in my opinion. Commanders are not known as a bad run defense, but they actually are. They're like one of the 5 worst run defenses in football in yards per attempt allowed. And Pollard has been really good when he's given the football and when the Titans are in competitive games. Pollard has seen multiple games of 20 plus carries in these close games like the Patriots game and last week against the Texans. I think it's going to be at the forefront of their game plan to give Pollard 20 touches in this game. And I think he's going to run for over 100 yards and possibly a touchdown. Plus, he's a capable receiver. I think this is one of the sneaky good starts of the week that could really help you win your week in week 13. Ramondre Stevenson, my guy, is a start against the Colts. I don't love the Colts defensive line against the Patriots O-line. That's definitely a mismatch. But the Colts have been just flat out not good against the run for a majority of the season. They rank 27th in yards allowed against the run. And they also allow a lot of touchdowns. They also allow a lot of receptions because of the type of defense they play. They play the classic Seattle scheme cover 3. They allow a lot of throws to the flat. So it's easy to get your running back involved and allow yards after catch, right? On top of that, they're very bad against running backs in the red zone, right? We saw Breece Hall. He scored 2 touchdowns last week against this Colts defense. We've seen them give up a lot of touchdowns in recent weeks. So I think Stevenson is one of those guys that we've seen consistently. Even if he doesn't put up yardage, he's able to put up a good floor because of the receptions he gets, the amount of work he gets, and then he's also definitely active near the goal line. And I expect the Patriots to score around 3 touchdowns in this game. So I expect Stevenson to at least hit the end zone once, and I think he could catch 5 or 6 passes in this game, and I wouldn't be too surprised. Our final start is going to be more of a bold, outside the box start. That's Tank Bigsby against the Texans. The Texans were not good against the run last week against Tony Pollard. Like I said, Pollard had about 20 carries for over 110 yards, and he had a touchdown. And to me, the Texans have not been great against the run all year. Last year, they were very good. This year, they've been kind of middling. I think if you need a start in your flex with some upside, I think Tank Bigsby is your guy. He's been explosive. He's been the best rusher in this backfield in Jacksonville. And with Trevor Lawrence back, it makes this offense a lot more competent. I wouldn't be shocked by a bit of a shootout in this game in Jacksonville because of how bad Jacksonville's defense is and because Trevor Lawrence is back, and that could really allow Jacksonville to play with some energy. They're coming off a bye, so Peterson has probably made some adjustments. So I think Bigsby, just as good as he's been, even on limited touches, he's probably worth a flex depending on your scenario at running back and wide receiver. Our running back sits. Najee Harris versus the Bengals. Bengals low-key, yes, they're a bad defense. They're a top 10 defense against yards allowed on the ground. And Najee is just not a very efficient running back. He's been better this year, but he's actually seen a decline in his production in recent weeks. And a lot of his production is based on the ground because he doesn't catch the ball very much. So I don't see how he has a huge game against the Bengals. I actually think that the Steelers might struggle offensively outside of a few prayers down the field to George Pickens. I think the Bengals are going to come to play at home off of a bye. I think their defense is going to really make sure they stop the run. So I think Jaylen Warren could have a little bit more success than Najee, but Najee's the guy that I would stay away from here. I just don't love the big bruising running back against the Bengals. They typically do a great job against those type of players. I mean, even look at how they've played against Derrick Henry, the best of the best at that archetype. They've held him under 100 yards, I think, twice this year. So yeah, Najee, not my favorite start this week. James Conner versus the Vikings. Vikings, in my opinion, have arguably the most consistent run defense in football, and it's really that simple for James Conner. The Cardinals do have a really good rushing attack, and Conner's a huge part of it, but I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball all that well unless it's in unconventional ways like using Kyler Murray. Conner's also not been hugely successful through the air. He's had his moments. He's had some good games, but Vikings are hard to run on. I don't think they're going to run the ball that well in the red zone either. This is probably a 3 yards per carry type game, and we've seen those games this season from Conner where it's a little inconsistent. Maybe he gets by with a touchdown, maybe he gets by because of his receiving totals, but I just don't necessarily see it against Minnesota where Flores is all over it, man. This defense is really well equipped, really well prepared, and I think they understand that the Cardinals, they're not the same offense when you stop the run. So I think that will be the priority for this defense. Brian Robinson against the Titans. You can't run the ball on the Titans. Jeff Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat is one of the nastiest and best interior duos in football, and it's especially hard to run the ball up the middle against this team. Robinson is not much of a bounce outside type of guy, an outside type of guy. He's right up the middle. He's going to take that hole, and he's going to try to hit it hard. And to me, I just feel like he's also injured, so there's a chance that he gets hurt early in the game. He leaves. There's a chance that he's going for 2 to 3 yards per carry. There's a chance that the injury is hindering his performance, which also hurts his productivity. He's not much of a pass catcher. McNichols will probably be more involved in that aspect. And again, I'm just not high on the Commanders' offense right now. I think they're seriously regressing. So I don't see how Robinson replicates the performance from earlier in the year against this style of run defense. Javonte Williams. Guys, before we get to Javonte, look at what Joe Mixon did against Tennessee. That's what I should have said. Joe Mixon's been unbelievable this year. He did nothing against Tennessee. Javonte Williams versus the Cleveland Browns. Javonte Williams had 8 carries last week for -2 yards. I don't think I have to say anything else. Denver has struggled to run the ball, and their most productive runner has been McLaughlin. Weirdly enough, Denver has been productive offensively, but a majority of it has actually come from Bo Nix and the screen game. A lot of short passes, a lot of RPOs, a lot of quick throws, and not their run game, not their power run game, which I don't think is going to have much success against Shelby Harrison, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Myles Garrett up front for Cleveland. I think Cleveland, they did a pretty good job against Pittsburgh. I think they'll do the same here against Denver. I think they want the rookie quarterback to beat them, and I think that will be their game plan. Wide receiver starts for the week. Ladd McConkey has been absolutely fantastic lately. I'd start him again against Atlanta. Atlanta, like I said, terrible pass rush. So McConkey's going to have time to run his routes at the intermediate level, creating separation and getting open for Herbert. And anytime I feel like Herbert is a start, McConkey is most likely a start as well. Atlanta's biggest weakness in their secondary is probably their nickel corner position. And that's kind of where McConkey usually is. In the slot, He's usually working, the sidelines. He's working the middle of the field, crossers. He's the third down converter. He's the drive starter. He's Herbert's go-to guy right now. He's going to get 10 plus targets. He's probably going to have 100 yards. He might have a touchdown. McConkey's been absolutely great. And with Herbert probably having a huge game here, you have to start Ladd McConkey against this absolutely putrid pass rush of the Atlanta Falcons. Jerry Jeudy in a revenge spot against the Cleveland Browns. Like I said, I think Denver is going to have to throw the ball in this game. Cleveland is going to have to throw the ball against the Denver Broncos because Denver, they're nasty up front. Denver has a good run defense, and Denver is probably going to force the ball out of Jameis's hands quickly by blitzing him. So the guy that can get separation early in the route, Jerry Jeudy. The guy that probably is not going to draw Pat Surtain very much because he's more of a Z and a slot receiver is Jerry Jeudy. More on that example in a second. Just hold on. Jerry Jeudy was phenomenal against Pittsburgh. That might have been his most clutch, best game I've ever seen him play. And it was in the snow, and it was in bad weather. And every time it felt like later in that game, Jameis needed to play, Jeudy was getting the call. He's had like 10 plus targets 3 out of the last 4 weeks. Like, he's been getting heavily targeted. He's been playing really well. He's catching everything thrown to him. And he's been the most dangerous receiver on the Browns. I am shocked, honestly. He is having a very good year lately. And I think he's going to have a good revenge game. I think that did not end well at all in Denver. He was called just another guy, a jag, by Steve Smith on a live broadcast. And that basically trickled into how Denver's organization kind of treated him. Just another guy. They never really treated him like anything special or a former first-round pick or a guy with talent. Now he's gone to Cleveland. He signed a contract. And since Jameis has been there, he's been doing some things. So I really like him with Jameis Winston. I would start Jerry Jeudy in this revenge spot on a primetime spot. Tank Dell versus Jacksonville. Nico Collins is back, which has actually opened up the field for Tank Dell, especially against a Jacksonville secondary that is one of the worst in football and one of the worst against wide receivers. But specifically, they have a good CB1, like a talented CB1 in Campbell, but their CB2, their slot is awful. So Tank Dell should be able to take advantage of either matchup. If Campbell draws Nico Collins, I still think Nico will win a lot, but Tank Dell is probably going to be the guy that has some big shot plays downfield, that gets loose, that gets open whenever Jacksonville does decide to go to, some aggressive blitz looks or to some zone coverage. I think Tank has looked a lot better with each and every week lately, and I think that's going to continue in week 13. So start Tank Dell against this just jabroni secondary of Jacksonville. Jordan Addison versus the Arizona Cardinals. I just like how Addison has played lately. He has a touchdown in the last 2 of the last 3 games. He had a great game, one of the best games of his career against Chicago last week. And he also had a pretty good game a couple weeks ago. So he's been trending upward, and he's playing an Arizona secondary that I think is not the greatest. I think you can beat them. I think you can, if Arizona does blitz and try to get after Sam Darnold, I think there's going to be opportunities for Addison to make plays. I also think that he's pretty effective in the quick game as well. And I think that this guy's been through sort of a weird season, a weird offseason, a lot of stress, but it feels like he's just playing free. He's playing going with the flow and finally feels like he's broken through, because last year, remember, he was phenomenal as a rookie. Earlier this year, it feels like maybe it was because Darnold is the quarterback now and they don't have quite the connection, but it just felt like he wasn't the same player. But lately, he's been trending up. So against this secondary, I think he's a good start once again. Just continue to ride the wave with Jordan Addison. Wide receiver sits. I would sit Cortland Sutton against Cleveland. Sutton's been fantastic, so this is a little bit of a bold sit. But Denzel Ward, if he's covering Sutton, I think he is the best corner in the league, or one of them. And I think he can shut down pretty much anybody. Pickens had a couple plays out there, but it wasn't too crazy. And then some of them were against the other corners. So I feel like Ward is probably going to track him just because Sutton, he's the only receiver on the team that's really that good. If they're going to play man, he's probably going to draw that matchup. That being said, Emerson is also a bigger corner. So if Sutton does draw him, I feel like that's a pretty good matchup for Martin Emerson. Sutton's played well, but this is the best secondary and best cornerback crew that Sutton has faced in quite some time. So I would actually fade him this week. And basically the entire Denver offense, outside of like, I don't even know, like if you need a flex, maybe like one of their lower end receivers. Like I just don't love Denver this week. I want to see them be productive against good defenses. I just do. Their defense is a start though. I will say that. DK Metcalf versus the New York Jets is a sit. Metcalf is great and a beast, but he's played Sauce Gardner before and he struggled. I think he could struggle again. And I also look at it as I don't think Geno is in the process of forcing DK the ball because I don't think he needs to in this game. I think Seattle will be able to run the ball against the Jets. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba will have a huge game. I think Lockett could have a good game. With Sauce Gardner drawing Metcalf a majority of the time, that's a really good matchup for Sauce. I also feel like the Jets pass rush could get after the Seahawks offensive line a little bit, which is pretty bad. So especially on the road, I feel like, bad offensive lines don't travel well. Geno could be under pressure, and that's just going to cause a lot of short passes, which that's not DK's game. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of explosives from Seattle through the air outside of maybe a couple broken plays. So I would sit Metcalf if I have better alternatives this week. Cedric Tillman versus Denver. I brought up how I like Jerry Jeudy because he's a slot, he's a Z, he's been getting a ton of targets. Tillman has been fading the last couple of games because of the matchups that he's been drawing a majority of the time. He's one of these big outside X receivers, and he's probably going to be covered and shadowed by Pat Surtain, or at least lined up in that spot a majority of the time by Stefanski so that he can open up other players and other receivers like Njoku and Elijah Moore. And for me, because Tillman has been trending down and Moore and Jeudy have been trending up, because of the potential draw of Surtain and a very good secondary of Denver, I would rather sit him and start one of the other receivers for the Browns this week. Deebo Samuel versus the Bills. I mean, you've seen the memes, the Mike Tyson walkouts for Deebo Samuel saying that he's washed, claiming that he's washed. Now, Deebo seems to be motivated, but I just can't I can't start the guy at this point. I mean, he's been so disappointing. He can't separate. He can't run routes and get open right now. And outside of manufactured touches, I don't think he's going to be very good against Buffalo, a team that has Teron Johnson, one of the best nickel corners in the league. If that's the matchup in the slot, that's a bad matchup for Deebo Samuel to separate down the field. So outside of screens and maybe handoffs, I don't think Deebo's going to have a big game. In the snow, it could get interesting because maybe they would use Deebo a little bit more actually to get their offense started. But Brock Purdy might not even play, and if he does, he's also maybe injured, so that also hurts Deebo Samuel. I'd rather start Jawan Jennings at this point over Deebo pretty much every week for the remainder of the season in San Francisco. My tight end starts. Let's go with Cade Otton versus the Carolina Panthers. Cade Otton has been beautiful all season. He really has, man. And then last week, he wasn't that good, okay? But I think it's a bounce back. Carolina's one of the worst teams against tight ends. We just saw Noah Gray, not even Travis Kelce, but Noah Gray have a huge game against Carolina, put up multiple touchdowns. So I think that could definitely be the case where Otton gets back on track here. I thought they were using him pre-Mike Evans as really their chain mover, their drive starter. Like, I was shocked because Cade Otton has not been known for this talented of a player, but man, he's really become like with Chris Godwin out, he's the 2 in Tampa, and given the matchup, I think he's a beautiful start against the Panthers this week. He's probably going to score a touchdown. Hunter Henry against the Colts. Henry has been one of the more consistent PPR targets in tight endville this past like 6 weeks because Drake May, that's his go-to guy. That's his chain mover. He's a big bodied target that can go up and get it on third down. He's one of these players that Drake often finds in scramble drill plays when he's under pressure, which is a lot because the offensive line of the Patriots is awful. And Hunter Henry is always a threat to score a touchdown. So he's a good floor play. And given the matchup this week where the Patriots should be in the game and it should be competitive, he's also probably a threat to score a touchdown as well. I don't think the safeties or the linebackers of the Colts are necessarily threats to cover him one-on-one, especially against more of a zone defense. I think Henry will thrive. So I would start him against the Colts. And then Pat Freiermuth against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have allowed a touchdown in 3 straight games, so that alone allows Pat Freiermuth to be a start. Cincinnati, Logan Wilson is beat up. He might not play. Keep that in mind at linebacker. That could be a spot that the Steelers look to attack. And Russ has always been a fan of his tight ends. I think Freiermuth gets it going if George Pickens and those deep moon balls are not exactly connecting. Our final start at tight end, let's throw Dallas Goedert in here against the Baltimore Ravens. I haven't brought up an Eagle or even, I don't think, a Raven in this video because a lot of their players are very obvious, like Saquon, A.J. Brown, right? But Dallas Goedert without Devontae Smith is probably not going to play again. I would start Dallas Goedert. Tight ends have had decent games against the Ravens as of late, and I think Goedert is just a very talented player that in a game that could produce more points, in a game where the Eagles could actually fall behind for once, in a game where the other team's going to be pressing Philadelphia to score, Goedert becomes way more interesting. In games where the Eagles can just run the ball every play, he's obviously not a good start, like against the Rams, but against the Ravens, where the Ravens are going to score their points, you're going to have to get to 30. Goddard's probably going to be a guy that has a big boom week at the tight end position. Those are my starts. Those are my sits for week 13. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, spike the like button and don't forget to subscribe for the rest of the weeks of the fantasy season. Peace, guys.